Folks, I am so excited, so excited to welcome to As the World Churns, one of the wizards behind messaging and fellow podcaster of Words to Win By, a person who's reporting, who's polling, whose focus groups, Democrats should listen to Anat Shenker-Osorio when she says, here's the way that you win. Here's some things that you could use in campaigns. This is what the American people want, but somehow they don't. Okay, let's talk. Let's start, Anat. Last week, New York Times article comes out. It opens up with a quote from you with regard to how voters see Democrats versus Republicans. You set the scene for us because the article went viral last week. Democrats were not too happy about it, but everything that you said in there was the truth. Tell us, what animal are Democrats?
So we do all sorts of things in focus groups. We have been in focus groups both with swing and with disaffected Democratic, so drop-off voters. For the last 4 years, we've done over 250 groups. And in this particular one, we asked a question that we ask often, which is if you had to liken Democrats to an animal, what animal would it be? We asked the same question of Republicans. And essentially, Republicans always get named as an apex predator. And people say that haltingly. It's like, yeah, I don't agree with what they do necessarily, but you got to give them credit. They get it done. And then with Democrats, traditionally, what we are used to is a slug, a sloth, a turtle, and a tortoise. But in this particular group, which happened in Atlanta, Georgia, with Black men who had voted for Biden in 2020 and in 2024 had not voted, had sort of very intentionally made the choice to stay home. There was a man who said, like a deer. And I was like, ooh, a deer. We haven't had a deer before. A deer's new. It's been 250 groups, it's good to get novelty. But then he basically went on to fill in that blank, not so auspiciously for Democrats, with a deer in headlights. Basically, the car is coming down the road. You can see the headlights and you just don't get out of the way. There were some other choice options in that group. I actually just reviewed the transcript and they were all, there was another sort of sloth reference, but the first reference was a squirrel, again, like an animal that just doesn't fight. That was the thematic. They just don't fight.
They don't fight. They move incredibly slow, or in the case of a deer in headlights, don't move at all and
Right.
just get run over.
Right.
None of the types of animals that a quote unquote resistance party wants to be labeled as. And I use the term sloth on a regular basis. You talk to hundreds, thousands of people to help Democrats get the intel that they need. And I often say that this party will focus group itself to hell because, look, we had Tim Walz, perfect example. Tim Walz gets on the ticket with Kamala Harris. Why? Because he's a plain spoken, white, straight, cis man who, can still speak with a progressive tone and values and in a folksy way that people get. He coins the fact that these guys, Republicans, they're just fucking weird. They're just weird. I don't know what else to say about them, but they don't function like the rest of us. He was beloved. He gets inside the Beltway, gets inside the establishment Democratic machine. They pull down the lever, and all of a sudden, all of the things that got us to like Coach Waltz, by the time that the campaign was coming to a conclusion, those things were gone. And now what happens inside of the Democratic machine? Because, again, you use focus groups, you talk to people to try and help Democrats get on the right page, get the right messaging, but somehow they still put out on this conveyor belt the same type of candidate, the same type of person that is devoid of any personality and anything that initially got people excited.
Yeah. So, first of all, to state what should be obvious, you only get answers to the questions you ask.
Mm-hmm.
And if you plant ideas in voters' minds and you don't ask open-ended questions, but rather you say, does it upset you if I keep making you use pronouns? Or does it upset you if Democrats only are, propping up trans girls in sports and they are not attending to other things? And, I'm not reciting verbatim the focus group protocols. I'm not looking at them. But you can make magical things happen if you ask the
Mm-hmm.
right questions. So that's one piece of it. But the other piece of it is that while we're doing qualitative investigations, which are
Mm-hmm.
what focus groups are, and, it's not a representative sample and all the caveats that any responsible researcher should provide, myself as well, we're also doing quantitative research. And that is where I would argue the difference really comes in. And the reason that the difference really comes in, if you'll allow kind of an explanation,
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
that when you do either a survey or a higher standard randomized controlled trial is just like drug trials. So basically, you have a control sample, they get a placebo, and then you have so-called treatment tracks where group A only sees ad A, group B only sees ad B, and you see where I'm going. And then
Mm-hmm.
after the fact, you ask them a question like vote choice, or you ask them a question like, do you disapprove or approve of this thing? Do you like this policy, etc.? So when we do any of that kind of quantitative testing, by definition, we have a captive audience. This is true for me too. It's not like I've discovered a way to do this without a captive audience. So, of course, you do that because it can teach you things, but you don't go grabbing a hammer thinking it's the best tool to screw in a screw. So when you have in-channel testing, which all of this testing is, focus groups too, you've recruited people. You've said, come to my thing, take my survey, answer my phone call. You know you're being watched. You know you're being studied. And you're made to watch the entire 30-second ad. You're made to read the 100-word text.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens in this kind of in-channel quantitative testing is that it's always the message that sounds more reasonable, has more facts, has more sort of a tone of measured, well, this policy is inadvisable because actually what it will do and estimates from economists. But in reality, nothing about that is how messages get delivered in the world. There
Mm-hmm.
is nothing about that that mimics or mirrors dissemination of messages, where task number one is to get people to stop scrolling in the first place.
Right.
And what I keep saying over and over again, which feels like the most uncontroversial thing I say, which is an achievement for me, is that a message that nobody hears cannot convince them. That doesn't feel like a hard thing to understand. And so what happens in this testing is that they go looking for a condition they can't recreate.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it comes out into the world and no one hears what they say, then they're like, oh, we have a distribution problem. And we absolutely do have a distribution problem in Fox News and X and the manosphere and all of that. And you know that, and I know that. But instead of recognizing that problem in the construction of the messages and recognizing that unless you touch a nerve, you're never going to touch a nerve. Unless you say something the base is going to want to repeat, the middle's never going to hear it because you don't have any other distribution mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Think about the distribution of something like Black Lives Matter. How did that happen? It happened because the base, the choir, first the activist core and the
Right.
creators and the originators, they wanted to say it. They wanted to physically wear it on their bodies. They wanted signs with it. They wanted hats. It's exactly the same kind of concept as Make America Great Again as a dissemination vehicle. If you get people to actually wear that on their body, or as once upon a time, if you can remember back, when people still used Facebook, younger listeners, you just have to believe me. Just take it on faith that this was a thing that happened. And during the marriage equality fight, do you remember everybody putting the little rainbow around their avatar?
Yep.
So that is the perfect example of social proof, of dissemination, of a message that, yeah, is going to piss the fuck out of the bigots, they're going to be real mad. It's not going to sound measured and reasonable in the way that hospital visitation rights and married filing jointly sounds sort of measured and reasonable. But it's going to be the thing that people actually see, which reconstructs what they
Mhm.
consider to be, quote unquote, common sense and what everyone believes in the way the world works. And so the essential problem is in how the testing gets done and what questions are asked and how the results are interpreted.
So when you then take all of that and you hear, for instance, Elise Slotnick, right? Senator, middle of the road, centrists of the centrists,
Mm-hmm.
who say that Democrats need to be more alpha. Democrats need to reclaim the fucking flag. These are things that she has said, and she is considered now to be, by the establishment, the future of the Democratic Party. The average person doesn't know her, right? And yet she was chosen to be the response to Donald Trump's first address. When you hear the things that she is saying, which sound to me very much like mimicking the right, and using what works for their base to say, okay, well, all we have to do is cosplay in the same way, and then our base will get behind us in the same way that MAGA has organically gotten behind Donald Trump. What is your response to that and the way that Democrats are lifting her up as like the new beacon on the hill?
Yeah. Oh, so many responses. First of all, in reality, in voter land and in disaffected voter land and swing voter land, the Democrats that are actually top of mind for people, and I mean low information, low engagement,
Mm-hmm.
tuned out, are actually AOC, to a lesser extent, Jasmine Crockett. That's
Mm-hmm.
who they actually know. That's who they admire. And that includes, interestingly, young men,
Mm-hmm.
including young men of various races who are sort of 1 foot in the manosphere, 1 foot in the AOC camp, because they consider her to be a straight talker and authentic and to live her values and to mean what she says and to be sort of, maybe I don't agree with her. I mean, it's not unlike how I characterize their response, swing voters' response to Republicans. I may not agree with everything they do, but you got to hand it to them. At least they get something done. It's like, I may not agree with everything that she says, but I can tell she actually means it. I can tell she's
Right.
actually
Right.
saying what she believes in the way that she believes it, and I respect that. So, what I would say to that is that, first of all, rather than actually lift up and champion the voices, whether they be in elected office or not elected office like you, that already have authentic engagement and listeners and actually understand that power. I mean, this is why, and I'll come back to Slotkin in a second, why this entire discourse around a Joe Rogan of the left is so ridiculous, because the reason why Joe Rogan functions for them is because they don't muzzle their manosphere people. They don't randomize control trial. You can
Mm-hmm.
only say this 100 words. You're not allowed to say that. Don't say that phrase. That's too incendiary. That's not going to work. They basically are like, okay, you're more or less on our program. You can say whatever the fuck you want to because it's not up to us anyway. Because they understand, again, that the choir
Yep.
has to want to sing from the songbook. Now, enter your question about Slotkin. The question is, who is actually the choir? Who is actually the set of people who are going to be motivated, mobilized to be in repetition, to be engaged in order to actually confront this authoritarian threat? And so it's just politics 101 that you need to be against your opposition, not the people that your opposition reviles. Because as soon as you are adding to the discourse that it is the immigrants or it is the queer people or it is the trans people or it is, inner city crime and safety and whatever, as soon as you are parroting those talking points, what you're doing is you are lending credence
Mm-hmm.
to their story. And for conflicted voters who very much can go either way, they are capable of believing either thing. I call them the good point voters because they're like, good point, but yeah, good point, but also good point. You're basically just helping the right suck
Spread their
them,
message. Yes.
spread their message. And so the thing that Slotkin has right is, yes, Democrats are perceived as being too weak. I
Mm-hmm.
agree with her. And the reason that they are perceived as being too weak is that they appear to have no actual durable values. And I think that when there are so many, for instances, to hold up, and this is a painful one. But in the moment during the Harris campaign, when she was on Brett Baer, right? She like went on
Mm-hmm.
right wing,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And he said, you're accused of just every time you go out, you have the same stump speech. You have the same stump speech. You keep repeating the same thing over and over. And she said something to the effect of, well, that's called message discipline. And people were applauding her. My response to that is, why are you revealing the sausage making? You're supposed to have message discipline, not tell people that you have message discipline.
Right.
The answer is, well, yeah, Brett, I have a set of unerring, unchangeable values. I believe in every single person's freedom. I believe that equality for all doesn't come with an asterisk or exceptions. I believe that people who work for a living ought to earn a living. I believe that on Monday. I believe it on Tuesday. I believe it on Wednesday. I'm going to believe it the rest of the week and all the weeks to come. Of course, I keep saying the same thing. I believe what I am saying. Like, you don't say, I memorized some talking points and I'm really good, and so I can
Mm-mm.
recite them to you, because that is repellent to people. Because basically, imagine your favorite actor in a movie being like, you know why I'm so good at this? Like, you have to play the part. You don't tell people, oh, I read a script and I memorized it and this is what it says. And so it's sort of that instinct to reveal the sausage making, which is just completely and totally mind-boggling. And I'll take it a step farther. This is what is just absolutely infuriating. So let's say you're a person. This is not a me person, because this is not how I feel. And also, I don't think there's evidence to support this claim. But you're a person who believes to the depths of your soul that voters' chief beef with Democrats is that they're too woke. That's
Mm-hmm.
untrue. I'm
Mm-hmm.
happy to
Mm-hmm.
explain why it's untrue. But let's say that's your internal makeup. Why on God's green earth? Why, Danielle, would you be shouting from the rooftops like Rahm Emanuel, like Slotkin, like all the rest of these centrist peddlers? You know what voters hate about Democrats? Voters hate Democrats. They hate that Democrats are too woke. Voters are extraordinarily, for the most part, low information, especially disaffected voters. They don't even know what woke is. They don't know what pronouns are. They've never heard Latin A. They don't even know that this debate is occurring until Democratic commentators who
Repeat it over
repeat
and
it
over and
over.
over again.
The analogy that I draw is, imagine if you were Achilles' best friend and you were like, I love Achilles. He's my boo. I'm not going to let anything happen to him. So I'm going to go on podcasts and television to tell people that his weak spot is his heel, because I love him so much that I need to tell people. And again, I want to underscore, that's not my analysis. So I hope that that is clear. But if it were my analysis, I wouldn't be shouting from the rooftops that this is what voters dislike. It is mind-boggling. And so the question is, why are they doing that?
And that is the question, and we're gonna have to leave it there today. But that's the question, right? Is you present these are the ways that the voters are thinking. This is what the voters want. You're giving the voters the information that the right wing wants them to have instead of what it is that you're actually offering. I continue to say you're not going to win this battle from a place of reaction. You actually need to develop an imagination about what you want. It isn't enough to just say who I'm not. People actually want to know who you are.
It's because when you have one consultant, and I know because I've been in these rooms, who presents to you robust, incontrovertible evidence that what the majority, and I'll go out on a limb and say the super majority of voter eligible Americans want, is they want elected leaders who actually give a shit about working people. They want people who will institute, as Harris during the first 6 weeks of her campaign proposed to do until she was told, oh, no, 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 price controls. They want a hike of the minimum wage. They want socialized medicine. They want universal single payer healthcare. They do not want a for profit, let's put your organs on sale and buy and sell life. They want corporations put under control. They want billionaires kicked out of politics. They want an end to corruption. That is what the majority of voters actually desire. And so when Democrats are presented with, hey, here's what voters actually would like, they would actually like you to walk your talk and be with and for working people of every color, background, gender, identity, sexuality, accent, faith, and they want you to authentically stand up for values. And then you have another consultant who's like, actually, you know what? All you got to do is just shit talk some Black people, shit talk some queer people, shit talk some trans people, maybe throw some immigrants under a bus. A lot of Democrats are like, you know what? I like option B better because option B is what's going to keep me tight with my donors. That's
Oh,
what,
dear.
that's it. That's it. That's the
it.
answer.
And that, thank you so much. I'm like, we're gonna have to do part 2 because there is so much there. Because yeah, consultant B is who they're gonna go with. I appreciate you, my friend, so much for making time for us on As the World Churns, and we're going to continue having this conversation because this is the conversation if we're ever going to get out of the manosphere, the magosphere, and more. We will leave it there today. Appreciate
Thank
you.
you. Appreciate you.